Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our work session for the month of February. Let me open the meeting and ask that everyone stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Okay. Let us open first with public comments. Is there anyone wishing to make a comment? If so, please come forward, grab a microphone, state your name, and try to limit your comments to a reasonable amount of time. Anyone? No? Okay, well, thank you for that. We'll move on to reports. First item up for our agenda is committee reports or committee updates. And do we have anybody wishing to volunteer? I could just go around the horn. I know we have some meetings that are scheduled later this month. Maybe we just do a little plug for those meetings to let everyone know about. But one thing I do want to let everyone know, NISBA, I participated in the Capitol Conference that was on Friday. I would say that 40% of the time was spent on the governor's proposed budget. And of that, about 90% of that discussion was on foundation aid and the lack of it being fully funded for this proposed budget season, 24-25 school year. Believe it or not, about half the school districts, I think 336, will see an increase to their foundation aid in some regard. There are 337 school districts that are going to actually see a decrease, which is something that I thought would not be possible, but anything is obviously possible. But this notion of save the foundation aid to be harmless, right? So any adjustments, you get minimum of what you got prior year. It doesn't seem to be proposed currently by the governor. I'm told that there is great bipartisan support to address this deficiency within her executive budget proposal. We'll see how that plays out. Christian and I are going up to Albany for Lobby Day. I believe it's on Wednesday, the 7th, which this will be number one topic of discussion for all the delegates who are going up, I'm sure. The good news for us, not to steal any thunder from Harvey, I can see that he has listed up there the proposed budget as we're now into that season. The good news for us is we're one of those 336 districts that actually do receive an increase. Our increase, I believe, is 3%. Thank you, 3.1% roughly. Thank you, Christian. Which I think amounts to an increase of about $700,000 over last year's foundation aid number. I'm told if we were fully funded, that number would approximate more like $1 million. So we're still, from a fully funded foundation aid perspective, according to the arcane formula that generates these values, we'd be about $300,000 short. Not as bad as some districts and not as good as others, but I think that's important for us to all be aware of. There's some other things that came out of that Capitol Conference. I'll spare you going in through my notes on it, any detail. There will be a posting of the whole conference. I think it lasted for 3.5 hours. Not like the marathon that Bass had to endure earlier this year. The one thing that I do want to call out beyond the foundation aid issue is that the governor representatives, I think the general counsel, as well as one of the deputy commissioners for education, participated in one of the sessions. And they left me with one statement that caught my attention beyond the notion of, we're fully funding foundation aid and we're trying to invest in our kids and all the things that you'd expect to hear. It had to do with zero emission bus mandate. And as much as they noted that there are challenges and difficulties going forward, don't expect the timeline to be radically changed, which I thought was an interesting way to start a discussion over this issue. And for the avoidance of the doubt, I know it will be discussed not only locally, but also up at Albany, because it is a serious issue. I think reasonable minds will hopefully prevail on this. But right now, there doesn't seem to be much desire to pay a lot of attention and do the real scientific assessments that need to happen to ensure that whatever happens can be done without any type of harm. Right now, if it were to happen according to the mandated schedule, there would be a great deal of harm that I think most districts, and this one in particular, would suffer. Christian, yes?
Just to piggyback on what you were saying, John, I think the first thing is this is a preliminary budget. It hasn't been passed. It's going to be negotiated. Right. So out of the roughly just under 700 districts in there, we were, we did better than 500 and worse than about 200. So, the point is that right now, we're doing fairly well. But I think it's going to happen, and this is why I said last time we met, to advocate for Cornwall School District, if you can write a letter to our representatives, because I think there's going to be some pushback to recover some of the districts that are kind of on the losing side. And I think that, we should do what we can to make sure that we continue where we are. And I think that, so we did not only just well overall, but we're toward the top in terms of what Orange County school districts did. We were on the top, but there were some districts in the county that actually lost funding.
That's a great point, Christian. And I think if the New York average to foundation aid, that increased amount, which I think total about $500 million, that was about a 2.2 or 2.1% increase. I think we were on the 3.1, according to that rounding number that Christian provided earlier, which means that we were better than the average. Still, it's preliminary, as you say, and I don't think we can take anything for granted, even though it's initial good news, right? We got to make sure that once the budget is passed and Cornwall is taken care of. Okay, I'm looking around. Communications, Brendan, any updates?
So I owe my communication committee members a first draft on that trifold that we want to produce with a basically just highlights of where we are now, capital project progress, and what's to come. So the plan is to then coordinate with the district on distribution and how we get that out. But yeah, that should be ready. I have a first draft, internal first draft sitting around. I just got to polish it up, send it out. But that's our next item.
Wonderful, thank you. Jim, you want to touch on?
Policy committee, we have a meeting this Wednesday at the district office at 7. And facilities committee, I'm sitting in for Lewis as the chair there. We have a meeting Monday at 6? At 6 o'clock at the district office.
District office.
Yeah, a week from today. And audit, nothing on the agenda, but it's probably time to start discussing with Harvey when we want to have the internal auditors come in and complete their work.
Great, thank you for that. Richard, anything to report?
Nothing new, but in the next month or so, I want to schedule a meeting to get prepared for the spring visits for the committee, and to also review and button up the committee charter that we've been working on. I know it's taken longer than we initially thought, but I think if we do it the right way, then it'll be worth it. So committee members, be on the lookout for an email in the next week or so to set up a meeting. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. Any other updates, committee delegate updates? I'll provide one. I think the Orange County School Board Association is going to have a meeting. I believe it'll be a Zoom call in regards to zero emission buses. I think Minnesink Valley, I might be wrong on the school district, they're going to provide their assessment, their experience, which hopefully will gain a lot of legislative attention and support towards why the current timeline that's been proposed is replete with a lot of difficulty. I believe that's in a week. Yeah, oh, this week. That's right, Wednesday night. Thank you for that. Okay, any others? Well, thank you all for those updates. Let's move on then to the consent agenda. Is there anyone who would like an item pulled from the agenda for separate discussion?
Number 6, please.
Number 6, tax assessment. Okay. Resolution, any others? Anyone else? Okay, so as per document, items in the consent agenda is 1 through 5. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passed. Thank you for that. Item number 6 to the consent agenda, tax assessment reduction resolution. I will take that as per document and ask for a motion. Thank you, Christian. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Brendan. Jim?
I'm just going to abstain from this one
And
for obvious reasons.
very good. So with that, is there any other discussion? None? All right. It's been moved. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All abstaining?
Abstain?
Motion passed. Thank you all. All right. Now we come to our spotlight presentation for this evening. As we mentioned earlier, it is budget season as we're just starting, and we're lucky to have Harvey walk us through our first of what will be several presentations as we get closer to adopting a budget for next year's school year. So Terry, do you have anything you want to add? I'll just turn it over to Harvey, and thank you, Harvey.
Alrighty, good evening. So as mentioned, tonight starts the budget process, and when I say starts the budget process, it starts the public presentations of the budget, which we really work on throughout the entire year. I would go so far as to say, even though we're talking about 24-25, we're already doing 25-26. But with that said, tonight is really the kickoff, and the first thing we want to talk about is, the process itself, just a real quick high level. It's important to note that, as I mentioned, it is continuous, year-round. We never just stop and put it on the shelf. It's collaborative. It involves all stakeholders, not only within the school district, but outside of the school district as well. Every decision is just, somebody makes a request and it's put up there. That's not how it works. We start with literally a clean slate, and every time something is asked or somebody wants something, we always ask, where are we now, and how will it help the kids forward? So that's a very critical piece of the entire process. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Terry, who's going to talk about the needs assessment in the past.
All right, so like Harvey said, this is a year-to-year process for the public, but we really look in totality at what we've accomplished in the past few years and what we need moving forward. So we're going to take a little walk down memory lane and just remind our board and the community what we've been able to accomplish collectively the past 3 years. So 23-24, as John spoke about, the impact of foundation aid weighs heavily on what a district is able to move forward. 23-24, our current school year, was that second half of the bump of the promised foundation aid. That's why you see a lot being able to be accomplished here, in addition to the moderate increase to the tax levy that we approved last year. So the 23-24 school year, we added 4 elementary early intervention teachers, 2 at CES, 1 at COE, 1 at Willow. We added a full-time elementary teacher at CES to address increased class sizes. We added an elementary school counselor that serves all 3 of our elementary schools, a full-time elementary special education teacher to address increased needs at the elementary level, a middle school counselor to bring them up to a total of 4 counselors, 1 per grade level, a high school special education teacher to address some co-teach needs tied to Regents courses, a district-wide E&L teacher to address our increased E&L population, a full-time high school social worker. We talked about the continued impact of the pandemic and the supports of our students there. We added 20 UPK seats to bring us up to 80 total for the district. Assistant track and field coach for the spring, and then a transfer to capital to replace all the classroom, office, and corridor doors at all of our buildings except for the high school. So that list totaled $2.4 million in addressing needs last school year. 22-23 school year, 2 things to keep in mind here. 1, our strategy, one of our key strategies for the capital project to garner community support was to go out with a 0 increase to the tax levy. So we stayed committed to that as a board and a community. The reason we were able to address some needs was really looking at that first half of the promised foundation aid. In addition to, I think we moved some things around with regards to our reserve. So that school year was the introduction of UPK in the Cornwall Central School District. So we were able to open with 58 seats, 20 at Butterhill, 20 at Windsor Academy, and 18 at the Arc of Learning. We added a full-time Mason maintenance mechanic, a 0.5 full-time occupational therapist, and then transferred a capital to the tune of $1.2 million to address the remaining conditioning needs at the middle school. So those needs totaled $1.5 million in 22-23, and overwhelming support for our capital project. 21-22. As you can see here, we addressed a lot of needs across the district. We added a full-time computer teaching assistant at Willow and COH, a full-time reading support teacher at the middle school, a full-time technology integration specialist at the middle school, a full-time social studies at the high school, a 0.6 full physical education teacher at the high school. In the area of athletics, an assistant varsity volleyball, modified boys and girls lacrosse, and varsity girls golf for athletics. In the area of building and grounds, a full-time custodial worker for the middle school, 2 custodial workers at the high school, and a full-time painter. Remember, Walter talked about bringing a lot of that work in-house and growing his own to handle a lot of the work that we used to contract out. We added a full-time music teacher district-wide, and we replaced 57 musical instruments district-wide. And finally, a transfer to capital, we replaced the middle school library floor and auxiliary gym floor, totaling $1.1 million. So it seems like a distant future, but it was 3 years ago that we kind of went back in time for those three lists. So that is really important to us as we meet with principals and directors and staff to talk about where we've been and what needs are still to be addressed in the district moving forward.
So fast forward to present day, this process assessment is something that is very critical to the budget. We start with regards to all the principals and directors. When we go through the information for 24-25, it's important to note that what you're going to see has been scrubbed, analyzed, discussed at great length, and that's why it's up there, because it's highly prioritized. It's also important to note that anytime you see something with regards to personnel costs on the next few slides, it's all in costs. It's not just their salary, it's all benefits, health insurance, etc.
All right, so for the needs assessment at this point for the 24-25 school year, we have a full-time intervention teacher need at COH in Willow. Currently, they share a kindergarten early intervention teacher between the two schools. This would allow each school to have an early intervention teacher at the kindergarten level at both COH and Willow. A 1.0 kindergarten teacher at This is to address the ongoing increase of class size that we've seen across the district. You've seen them in the enrollment reports. There's currently a significant number of kindergarten classes where they're sitting at 24 to 26 students. CES has space to add this additional classroom, and we avoid the bubble if we teacher there. The bubble that I'm referring to, 2 years ago, I think we discussed the fact that Willow had an additional teacher, and that teacher followed those students through second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. That was the bubble that went through Willow. By adding this, they would have 5 sections, 2, 3, and 4. We also have a 0.5 speech. This would provide speech services for students who do not qualify for special education services, but are in kind of that at-risk category. So this would address some early needs before they get gain qualification for special education, and hopefully keep them from actually qualifying for special education by as early as possible. At the middle school, this is a request that we saw last year, need for additional hall monitors. These hall monitors would provide needed supervision and oversight throughout the school, particularly in between, not in between classes where a lot of our staff are out in the hallway on duty, but while students are in class and they have to use the restroom and find other excuses to be out of class, these monitors would add to the supervision needs at the middle school. At the high school, there's a need for a full-time business teacher. Business classes are the most popular offerings, but many students are consistently getting closed out as they go through their course selection process. As life skills become more essential, the high school is also looking at classes that focus on taxes, loans, job skills, and resume building. This is going to be a mandate soon, so one way or another, we're going to need to look to adding this. In Virginia, it's a requirement. States across the nation are looking at the impact of financial literacy for students before they start taking out credit cards and loans and the like. We would like to make our 0.8 physical education teacher full-time. You'll see in a few months, new physical education teachers that will be up for tenure, so I've had the pleasure of watching them in action at the high school, and these classes are bursting at the seams. So, quick example, I did an observation at 7 o'clock in the morning for freshmen who were going to be convinced to get in the pool. 7 o'clock in the morning, first period. And that class had 31 students in attendance that day. So that tells you what those classes look like over the course of the day. This next item is a repeat from last year as well. The need for improvements to our system at the high school, the auditorium. We get emails and concerns, legitimate concerns from parents, students, staff about the need for updating this system. This quote is our most recent investigation into this matter with folks coming in to take a look at our needs. So that's the price tag there. For our services, the need right now is for a special education coach. So as you think of the ongoing needs that we've talked about in the district with our special education students, meet their needs, a special education coach would be able to work directly with our teachers to provide ongoing support, modeling, coaching about how to develop appropriate goals, how to progress monitor, and things of that nature, as we make sure our students are meeting their IEP goals. And last but not least, this is a repeat from last year. We believe that the district would be with a communication specialist. We talk all the time about communication with our staff and our community about important things going on. And we just worry about the bandwidth of staff and the board to get that communication out in a timely and effective manner. So this is a repeat from last year that we believe would serve the district well. So the total cost of the needs that we just went over is just over $1 million. All right, I'll turn it back over to Harvey.
So it's important to note that the needs that Terry just went over, the process is such that we don't know if we can address those needs just yet. We will know soon. We obviously have to finish the budget, present it to the board. We also have to wait for, as close as possible, final numbers from the state with regards to state aid. If we're in a situation where we have more expenditures, we can address it. If we don't, we may have to look at supplanting something else that's currently in the budget. So those are some of the decisions that we'll be addressing a little bit down the road. So with regards to the budget in front of us, the parameters and the variables that we're facing, state aid. As alluded to before, we got approximately $2.2 million in state aid per the governor's proposed budget. It's important to note the governor's budget has to balance. The final budget does not, as crazy as that sounds. She's required by law to present a balanced budget. And again, our foundation aid of that 2.2 is about $707,000. A couple key points. One of my concerns, in light of everything that John and Christian said about foundation aid, from my perspective, my concern right now is that I feel like every district who even got an increase in foundation aid risk of losing some of that aid. Forget about getting what we're entitled to. And the reason for that is because there is a strong push for those districts foundation aid that they could at least be saved harmless, meaning they don't take a decrease. Their demographics are changing in those districts, and that's why when you take away that save harmless, it goes down. There's tremendous pressure right now up in Albany to at least keep them where they were. If that happens, where do we think that money is going to come from? I don't know. But the state is currently facing a little bit over a $4 billion deficit, okay? And that's why the governor had to do things such as those changes to foundation aid. There's a lot on the table up in Albany. The point is, I would be thrilled if we hopefully can at least keep that. The next big item with regards to variability is the tax levy. As we talk about every year, we have to strike the right balance between what we need and what we put on the shoulders of the taxpayers. As a point of reference, every 1% change in levy, a little more than $500,000. So, you know, when you compare it to the increases we're getting in state aid, it's not as significant, but it's still important and relevant. And obviously, the final increase and decrease in state aid will be somewhere, hopefully, around the end of March, because they have to pass a budget by the end of March. As far as the expenditure side, a couple things we know. The teachers' retirement system, the contribution rate went up to 10.02%. In the current year, it was 9.76. Doesn't sound like a big increase, but it is from the perspective that the number of which it's applied against is pretty significant. It's about $37 million. And then you have the employee retirement system. These are the non-instructional staff, clerical, buildings and grounds. Their rate went from 12.76. Again, it's a little bit more significant, but again, their base is a little lower. That's applied against about $6.5 million. Health insurance premiums, the good news is the aggregate premium increase is 3%, which is outstanding, compared to 4.5% this year, which in and of itself is outstanding too. What I can tell you though is, and I'll be talking about it when we talk about health insurance, is one of the not so favorable variables that we're going to be dealing with is the mix, as I call it. I have more people on the family plans than we do on the single in the past. People are getting married, people retiring, and then to the plan to the who's still in the school district. Transportation, we have seen an increase, a pretty good increase in the out-of-district special education placements that are requiring additional transportation expense. We'll be talking about that in great detail. And then lastly, it's good to know that all the bargaining unit contracts are currently settled. The reason that that's good is because now with regards to the budget, the numbers that I'm going to be presenting to you, there's no projections, there's no estimates, it's based on reality. One of the variables we have to take into account is the property cap. We've all heard this over and over again over the years. Based on the formula, our maximum allowable tax levy is 3.31%. Okay? It's important to note this is the allowable. It does not mean we're going to be doing it. Okay? The current year, the maximum allowable was 1.76. So what plays into that number? There's two big items. One is what they call the tax base growth factor, and that's based on the increase in assessables due to hard construction, brick and mortar additions, whether it's new construction or someone puts an addition on their house. Somebody's house gets reassessed and it goes up $100,000, that doesn't go into this. That's just a part of a different calculation. And then you have the tax levy growth factor. The last few years, it hasn't really been much of a conversation because inflation and so forth has been greater than 2%, but the law caps. So we are at 2. When we look at our history here, we have a 10-year history of our adopted tax levy increase as well as the maximum allowable. And I'm happy to say that I think we've done a very good job in terms of balancing between what we need and what we put on the taxpayers' shoulders. Current year is 1.2%, and as I mentioned before, we could have gone as high as 1.76%. And then in 22-23, it was 0%, but we could have gone almost up to 5%. And the rest you can see there. In terms of what the future holds in terms of discussing all this, we have 4 meetings before we have the budget vote. That 4th meeting, it is a meeting that the board will have to adopt a budget. And with that, I will open it up to any questions that anybody may have.
Go ahead, Bass. Thank you.
Question about adding business class in the high school. What would be the contact time with the student? Like, you have one FTE for the whole high school, but a student in high school, like what grade and how much contact time with this new FTE would have?
It's really based on course selection, correct, Catherine? So it could be any grade level where we would have a business elective. Our teachers in that department have looked at what types of electives this position could add to our course selection process. So it's really adding an elective as an opportunity for students throughout the high school. Contact time, they can't teach any more than 5 sections. So that's 5 sections by 30 would be the impact.
Thanks.
Brendan?
Thanks, John. Yeah, first just a financial question, Harvey, maybe more than one. So going back to that state aid, it was your revenue slide. Just about so the approximately $2.2 million increase overall, $700,000 of which is foundation aid. So where does that other $1.5 million come from in the projected aid, if not foundation aid?
Sure. Most of it, foundation aid is a formula-driven aid. There's 2 kinds of aid. There's formula-driven, where they have these crazy, algorithms, but the other is what we call expense-based. So we spend something in one year, we get aid the next. A large portion of that is transportation, okay? What we are going to be spending this year, we get aid on next year. The reason that it's going up so significantly, you might recall, we had an RFP for transportation. It went up quite a bit. The good side to that is we're going to get more.
Got it. So I'm trying to find a silver lining in the uncertainty. So the uncertainty is around the 700 in foundation aid. We just don't know if that's going up or down.
Correct.
But the 1.5, how can I categorize that? Locked in, more or less locked in?
That's not going to change.
Got it. Okay. Good. And regarding the now back to the just the needs assessment and the academic side. Maybe this is for Terry. Just curious, just so I understand. Let me find it. Yeah, the special education instructional coach. So would that position, that person, come in contact with? Would they teach any classes, or I'm just trying to figure out. Just imagine, what that role looks like. It's just the first time I've heard of this position. So just looking to learn a little bit more about what that person would do.
Absolutely. An instructional coach, special education instructional coach is really not having a direct teaching responsibility for students. Their impact is coaching, modeling, supporting teachers who in turn would support students. So a model that I've used for an instructional coach is you're going to have X amount of contact time with every first-year teacher I have that I hire, because their needs are so significant compared to my veteran teachers over the course of the first 4 months of the year. So a special education coach could work with new special education teachers to help develop IEP goals for students that they just aren't familiar with. How do you write high-quality IEP goals? They can model teaching strategies in the classroom, so something that we always work on is effective co-teaching practices. So if we see something not quite in sync, that coach could go in and model what a effective co-teaching model could look like, so we're not having a highly paid assistant in the classroom. You're really both working directly with students, so it's really think about a coach for teachers and staff who would in turn benefit.
So, and that's helpful. And it almost seems like, would that person also be then working with pupil services as well? So it's kind of an in-between of the
Right.
two.
Could help identify, so my deal with my instructional coach was you need to be seen and authentically trusted by teachers. I need to go to you, Brendan, to say, I'm kind of struggling with classroom management. I'm not going to tell Terry that, but I'm going to tell you that. Help me really develop some strategies. That's what we would want for the special education coach. So anything that he or she would bring to Nicole's department would be things like, I'm seeing a trend or a pattern in teachers' ability to X, Y, or Z. Not Miss Moriarty is struggling with X, Y, or Z. It's, here's some things I think we need to address as a district. We might want to look at that as our next PD opportunity when we have a superintendent's conference day, things of that nature. So that's really, this can be a high leverage, high impact position when you do it right, because it's the teacher providing support for one another and not a top-down kind of feel.
And by the way, I just looked over your head and it's listed under pupil services, so I rescind my last comment. I thought that this was under the high school because it came right after.
Yeah.
Which so answers my next question. This is district-wide, not to a
Right.
particular school.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
I'm sorry, are you done? Yeah, thank you for that. Let me piggyback on Brendan's question, because I believe in coaching. I think coaching is a great way to develop people, and if it's done right, it's a multiplier, as Terry just said. Do we have other instructional coaches within the district?
No.
So this is a new role specific for special education?
Correct.
Okay. It seems like the attributes and the benefits that you just enumerated for instructional coaching should apply also for regular teachers, right? Do we do that now? And if we do, how do we do it?
So the dilemma that I'll share coming from Fairfax is every school would benefit from having an instructional coach dedicated to their staff. One, the relationships you build ongoing with parents, students, and staff members is critical. So for this first step, we really looked at scale and what the impact could be right now. Our special education population is about 12 to 14%, I believe. You take that and extrapolate that with how many special education teachers we have in the district. This position could impact all of those teachers. Scale this across the district, we would need 2 at the high school, 2 at the middle school, and at least 1 for each elementary school. So I would love to see it. My instructional coach was my absolute right hand as a principal. It's just, it didn't make it to the top of our needs right now.
Understood. Do we do anything, though, to try to bridge that gap right now?
Yeah, so, I mean,
Do we have confiders for the young teachers, mentors, or such like
yes.
that?
So we have a great mentoring program run by one of our teachers. We pair mentors with mentees before the school year begins, and they do exactly what I described. Mentors help them kind of frame out the year. Beware of October, because in the blink of an eye, you'll be at parent-teacher conferences, so make sure that you're getting everything in order for that. How do you run a parent-teacher conference? What do you do when there's disagreement? So our mentoring program is really taking care of that. We pair our veteran rockstar teachers, our board-certified teachers with our new teachers to provide that coaching and support.
And that's more of a one-to-one
That's
type
correct.
of relationship. This is a little bit more expansive.
That's right.
And you mentioned certification. This coach would be certified by New York State?
There's
Maybe not
no-
for coaching, but for instruction?
Yes. for
Special ed,
instruction, yes.
specific? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Terry. Christine?
On the same topic, who does this position report to in the district?
So this person would report to Megan. So we want to, there'll be some collaboration with PPS, but instructional coaches really should follow the vision and direction of our instructional strategy approach, our philosophy as a district, and then work from there.
Are they also charged with working with, mostly in the high school, I imagine, you have special ed kids who are not in a co-taught for a variety of reasons. Would they be charged with helping those gen ed teachers also manage the special ed relationship in the classroom?
Absolutely. So anywhere where our special education students, where we might see a gap or a need, we would expect this person to step in and address that.
If I could move on to the reading support teacher in the middle school, can you talk a little bit about what, I'm imagining it's beyond AIS, because it would be called that, right? Is this a Wilson trained or an Orton Gillingham trained, or is there some criteria to be a reading specialist in the middle school? And how does that, am I catching that wrong, Christian?
It's in a previous year.
Reading support teacher, oh. I was so excited about that. We could use more.
Yes.
Okay.
But
Sorry,
really-
thank you for correcting me.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
Christine, anything else
No.
on that? Richard?
Thank you. So looking at the needs assessment, right, there's maybe about 10 or 12 items. I'm sure if you included everything everybody wanted, there'd probably be hundreds of slides of that. My question is, if you can just explain the process a little bit more of how everyone is involved in this and how these needs get worked up to this point. Because I'll say, you know, while we were on our visitation committee, we heard a lot of different things, and, you know, everybody has different takes on that stuff, but some of the things I felt were maybe a high priority. So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, can you give me an example, just so that I have a frame of reference of high priority?
I could give an example. I don't know if I want to say it
Okay.
here, but I would say infrastructure, security, stuff like that.
Okay. So the process really starts at the school level. So at the middle school and high school level, our department chair feedback from the teachers and staff on their team, and then they funnel them up to the principal to develop that list. The principal is then in charge of kind of scrubbing the needs, having follow-up conversations with different departments. Some of the things they're able to handle within their existing budget, or look at end-of-year type things. At the elementary level, it's the same thing. It's ongoing conversations with staff. All of our elementary schools have team meetings where they can express their needs to our school administration. At that point, we meet with every single director and principal at district office. We have a separate meeting set up with them individually to go over, tell us about all the needs that you presented with, what really rose to the top as prioritized needs and why. And we go through that process with every director and principal.
Okay, so the building level people are the ones that basically prioritize their own list, and then it comes here.
Buildings and in departments.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. And the other thing, it's easy. I think I know the answer to it. The speech teacher in the elementary school, that's not for a specific school, it's for all three schools?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Jim?
Yeah, thank you, Terry and Harvey, for the presentation, as always. Few questions. Harvey, we kind of had a good discussion around here about the revenue projections. The expenditures, you talked about some of the drivers. You did not give us here's the rollover budget. If we didn't add the $1,024,000 in needs, what would that be? Is that a number that you have, or is that next, we're gonna see that in 2 weeks?
That's in,
Okay. Always good to have both halves of that equation before we start making determinations. One of my favorite questions, is it aidable? The high school sound system, is that aidable? Is that infrastructure, or is that?
so it's a good question, because it's kind of in a gray area.
Yeah,
I even went so far as to ask our architects and so forth. We could we could try to get 8 on it. Here's the problem. You have to submit a submittal to SED as a capital project. We will not see that project for over a year, okay? If we do it as part of our budget and we realize we're not going to get aid, we can get it done presumably over the summer, okay? So it's really more of a time thing. And here again, when we send it up there, they could actually deny it, kick it back for a year. It's more of like equipment.
Right,
It's not like a permanent fixture,
right.
like a door even. So,
I thought that would be the answer, but it seemed like a gray area, yeah, for that type of question. And then I don't know who wants to handle this one, but for the kindergarten teacher, I guess my question is really, look, there's no question that we need more instructional staff at the elementary level based on the demographic trends that we've been seeing. If kindergarten's overflowing this year, do we need to be hiring a kindergarten teacher, or do we need to be hiring a first grade teacher? Or do we need to be hiring a first grade teacher and a kindergarten teacher?
So we've added, at CES, since I've been here, we've added two positions. One was added, one was shifted from another grade level to handle the increase in enrollment that we're seeing at the primary level. I will tell you, it's like whack-a-mole trying to figure out which grade level is going to pop. The frustrating piece is last year and this year, we solve one grade level and another one goes over where we want them to be. So this would be, going into next year, we would have 5 sections all across CES that would allow us to place those early families appropriately, not allow grade levels to pop over, rather than what would happen if this is not approved. Just being fully transparent, I would move a second grade teacher to kindergarten. Robert and I would watch the numbers through July. We would hit approximately the first weekend of August. I call Robert and I say, do you want to keep it at this grade level, or should we move it based on where our enrollment numbers are coming right now? Robert has tough conversations with me of, the teacher has already had her eyes on the classroom. She's already brought in all of her boxes. All of her stickers say, go first grade. So we have the conversation about where the benefit would be. If we do this early on, K1 and 2 are all with an additional teacher, which should allow us to even out what we've seen across the district. So one more example I'll give on this. K goes 1. If our prediction is correct, we'd still continue to see those numbers come in at the K level. As we see families come into the district at Willow and COH, which are already at capacity, we would start placing them at CES where we would have room.
Right, yeah. You wouldn't be determined based on geography. You'd be determined, hey, you missed the early deadline.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. Possibly you could just maybe email it to the board or put it as a slide of future presentation, just sort of give current staffing level and where we'd be proposed just on one page to kind of really hammer home the point. I'm sure, I know this has been driving you nuts, and it's, been a problem all year, just to make sure that, I just want to make sure we're addressing it in the best way to solve the problem.
Absolutely.
And not saying that this doesn't do that, I just want to understand to make sure that we're doing that.
Yep.
So, and then I guess my last question, Terry, you had mentioned when we had the drop rotation presentation that may or probably would have some budgetary demands with adding that extra period, that we would want to add extra classes to be available. Does the business teacher handle that, or will there be future staffing needs? Are there other needs, that we should be thinking about for this budget season?
Yep, great question. So the full-time business teacher would handle a lot of that need. The other thing that we're looking at is, while we're bursting at the seams at the elementary level, we are not seeing that at the high school level. So I'll just give an example. My stepdaughter's class is the smallest class in the district. That sixth grade class is going to rotate on up. They'll be the smallest class to go through the district. We look at sections. So Joe will run the numbers to say, where do we have room, that course selection process. If you have less students at the high school, where can some other students fill in those courses? And then Ms. Wilhelm has asked each department to look at, if you were to shift some courses within your department to increase the demand of students, what might those shifts look like? So it's kind of been a conglomeration of all of the above with the full-time business teacher on top of that. All the other pieces with regards to kind of supervision and things of that nature, we're taking care of via stipends or increasing the hours of maybe a monitor or someone that we already have in-house.
Got it. And by sections, you mean, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but let's say math, but you used to have 3 sections of algebra, now you only need 2 because
That's right.
there's a few less students, and with that additional period, they can teach statistics or,
That's right.
or some other course. Okay, great, thank you.
Anything missing there, Catherine?
Great. Thank you, Jim. Good questions, everyone. Bass? And then Christian.
Thanks, John. I'd like to go back to the 1 FTE special education instructional coach. You know, one of the best way I personally find when you want to justify a requirement, like request for funding, best way to propose it is to say, what happens if you don't get it? So if we don't get those $129,000, what would happen to us, to the district?
Yeah, great question. So as we look at the ongoing needs in our district, one area that continues to rise to the top are addressing the complex and diverse needs of our special education students. As we look at how many personnel actions have you seen over the past 2 years that have been related to, we're continuously bringing in teachers and supporting them ongoing to address our special education students' needs are important in our view. If we weren't to have this, would the department or that group of students overly suffer? No. But we're always looking at how can we enhance and continuously improve the way we operate as a district, and this would be a key area that has always risen to the top as a high needs area for the district, as a way to don't just add another administrator or something of that nature. Really, it's a teacher supporting other teachers to help them improve their craft. But great question. You wouldn't see a drop in X, Y, or Z. It's just a way to enhance and improve the instruction and supports that we provide our students, our special education students.
Thank you. The counter argument, I mean, to this kind of logic, if you want, is like, how did you manage the whole time without it? Right? So it's kind of that's where you can make the point is that no, we were struggling. I don't know. I mean, that's going to be much better. I mean,
Yeah. I'll just tell you from personal experience, before I had an instructional coach, I thought I was pretty good at providing my teachers with ongoing support by doing informal observations, providing them with targeted and specific feedback within 24 hours, and then cycling back and setting goals with them over the course of the year. Then reality sets in and your best laid plans just kind of go awry. So as you get into busy times of the year, like budget and things of that nature, you may have set out to observe a new teacher 10 times over the course of the year and end up with only 4 to 5. When I had an instructional coach, I could lay out a plan with her to say, top tier, top priority are our first year teachers. You support them before all other teachers for the first 3 months of school, because that's where a lot of new teachers swim. With new things like guided reading and things of that nature, the struggle that we had was we could send teachers to professional development at BOCES or other things, and our teachers would say, You keep pulling me out of the classroom, and I'm trying to develop relationships, get my instruction, and get my feet under me, and you keep sending me out for professional development. An instructional coach can work alongside that teacher with her students or his students and model what effective guided might look like, how to implement strategies to support a student's goals. So you have a great point, Bass. Sometimes you don't know until you have that benefit sitting right beside you and see how teachers flourish under a coaching model.
Thank you for that, Terry, and Bass, for your question, too. Christian?
So my first question's for Harvey, and this is about the tax levy cap. So last year at this stage of the budget process, you had the tax levy cap at, I think, at 2.8%, before, the final one was at 1.76.
Right.
So from this point to where we're going to end up, what changed last year, and is that something we can anticipate for this year?
The key component that changed last year is the same one that's going to change it for this year, and that's we're waiting for a piece that we get from BOCES. Part of the capital exclusion in the formula, we use their capital number in addition to what we have. We don't have that yet. So I'm using what we had last year because just from what I heard from them, but it's not going to be the same.
So do we have a range of what we think that, so based on what you just said, you anticipate it going down from where it is right now. We don't know how much it's going down?
I do know.
Or we have no idea whether it could go up, down, or have no impact?
I'm being told it could go down, okay? I don't have anything in,
Okay, so I realize at this stage, I was just wondering what was driving that, since it did change
Right.
from the first to the last.
What's largely driving it, you might remember last year, BOCES has a project that they're undertaking right now. Part of that weighs into that number, so.
Okay. So I have some questions just about some of the 2024-25 budget requests. So how many, for the kindergarten early intervention teacher, how many are at Lee Road?
There are 2 at Lee Road.
Okay, so, and Lee Road's about approximately
Double the size.
twice the enrollment of the other elementary schools.
That's correct.
So this would be evening it out at the same, you could say, per capita level, given the enrollment of each building.
That's right.
Okay. Kindergarten teacher. Last year, people were telling that one of the things, the bottleneck was space. Do we actually have a classroom that an additional teacher would have to have an additional kindergarten class?
Yes. One of the things I'm smiling at is Jim was part of the last facilities committee meeting where we asked our 3 elementary principals to engage us in a conversation. If you were to see a 5% growth in enrollment and needed to add a classroom to your building, would it be possible, and where would it go? COH, no go. They have no space. They would not be able to add a classroom anywhere in the building. Willow identified 2 different areas that they could add another classroom, and CES identified 1, but they all had the caveat of, something's got to give. So if we were to go beyond 1, even at CES, some of the impact that we would be looking at are things like art on a cart, music on a cart, things of that nature that we just don't want to see for our students.
What space would they be taking at each of the buildings to provide the additional classroom?
It could be,
there were 2, and there was 2 at Willow and 1 at CES.
Yeah, it could be a STEAM lab. It could be a classroom that's a shared space with AIS providers or other related service providers. It was different at each school.
Okay. So kind of piggybacking onto Bass's comments about the business teacher, we have 2 FTEs in the high school in the business department, or is it more than that?
I don't have the numbers offhand.
It's 2. And what is the average enrollment in those classes?
We can find that out.
So if you, yeah, I just being familiar with the process, I'm just curious about, I think the main reason kids get closed out of business classes is because of scheduling. And business classes are singletons, they're only offered 1 period, and you can't take 2 classes in the same period. So I'm wondering, is this going to be basically offering the same number of students, but just kind of giving them more schedule flexibility, or is that going to be anticipated provided by creating a drop rotation schedule is actually going to solve that in the sense that you have a more flexible schedule? So that's my question, and I don't need an answer right now, but I just want to see what the numbers are so that I can see that. But I do want to ask one other question. What classes do you think you're going to be offering? I see here in the description, taxes, loans, financial literacy. So I teach in a business department, and fairly large. We have 10 teachers district-wide, so we're one of the largest in the state. I'm wondering what class that is, what we're not offering now, or is this simply creating the capacity for an anticipated financial literacy requirement in the future?
Yeah, we can get that from Ms. Wilhelm, what course titles those teachers put on the table as opportunities for our students moving forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, welcome.
Great. I have just 2 questions and maybe an observation. So the first observation, when I was participating in that capital conference, what was in the proposal, the governor's executive budget, was discussed. But was also discussed the items that were not covered. And so I know we've gone through tonight the top, I guess, 9 or so priorities. We don't have a top 10, we have a top 9. I noticed that there's no mention of any capital. I know the sound system is, remains to be determined whether that is official capital or not. But I guess it would be helpful for us as a board, and I think Richard brought it up, what was just missed the cut? Maybe the 5 or 6 things that are there, so we can start getting our heads around how we plot things this year versus next year versus the year after. Because I'm assuming that those needs would not change. They would be persistent and would need to be addressed over time. So I think that would be an observation and maybe a request in there. In terms of the question, I think everyone's covered my questions. I just want to make sure. Heard the drop rotation from Jim. We're going to cover down on that. The equipment, I'm not sure who raised that question. I think Jim might have as well. But you're also basically focused on if we waited for the state, we'd be waiting a long time. So that's a fair point. In terms of personnel, I think Jim also brought this up. It would be helpful. I could hear Terry say, hey, we're going to have a very organized CES that is scalable at K through 4. And that would consist of either 4 or 5 classroom teachers at each grade level. Having a document that shows that, not just at CES, but also at Willow and at COH, I think would be helpful for us as a board to understand how we look and how we're organized. Because I think as people look at classroom sizes, it's a concern. I went back in time to look at what classroom sizes looked back in 2008. And the reason why I did that, just so you know, there's been talk about this arcane formula that Harvey mentioned earlier about being reviewed and possibly changed. And what that would do, I have no idea. But I just wanted to see what we looked like back in like 2008. We were about 10% more than we are today, and the class sizes were busting at the seams at 25, 26, and even 27. Which is a very interesting statistic, I guess. So things over time have gotten better, I believe. COVID has changed a lot, but it sounds to me that Terry and the team are working to make this a scalable and more resilient toward a class size that's less than 25, which I think would be a preferable outcome. Christian, you
just to follow up, because to clarify my own understanding of this, is that there is an attachment for an enrollment report at the end of every agenda on the board docs. And I presume that's what you're asking for, or you're asking for something different than that?
teacher enrollment
It-
report.
Well,
Yeah, which might benefit from a slight revision or improvement, I guess, because average class size also includes some special ed, so if you, it doesn't give you a clear picture.
So you want something that's more granular than what we have right now?
Not in terms of the counts, but in terms
Okay.
of the structure of the organization. That's really what my question's designed at. I heard Terry, and I got the visual immediately, right? CES, K through 4, 5, 5, 5, 5.
Yep. And I mean, just really quick.
That's very powerful.
And
This-
COH is 2, and Willow are 2. Like that's
Right.
This would bring CES to 5 across the board, COH 2 across the board, Willow 2 across the board.
And then doing that for the middle school, high school's a little different because of the classes, core versus elective, I get that. But having that type of visual, I think would be helpful, at least for me.
At the elementary, the 5 and 2,
Yeah.
I can do or explain. The middle school, they're in teams, and
It gets difficult.
Right.
That I get. And maybe that's a segue to the conversations we'll have about strategic planning
Right.
and how we think about things like staffing and because one of the things that came out of the conference that I didn't mention before, but I will now, as it pertains to staffing, is the forecast by, I believe it's the teachers union, that over the next 10 years, there's 180,000 teachers that are going to be retiring. And I know we have a sizable this year that have already declared, and we have some that will probably declare next year. And so that's a real need that we need to start, at a strategic level, start to incorporate in how we're organized here and what type of resources we throw at this issue of giving our kids the best opportunity to learn. Christian, was that okay?
I don't need to, I can ask for clarification.
Okay, great, thanks.
Can I just
Yes,
ask, though?
go.
My understanding is special ed kids are in that enrollment number, maybe perhaps minus folks that go out of district. So we don't have separate numbers for special ed versus traditional, or do I misunderstand that?
Or special class, we would pull out into a separate.
Right, but if you were looking at that enrollment grid that you provide, or classroom size, it is inclusive of special ed kids that are in a gen ed class.
Right.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So the only point is, if there's like a class of 3 kids, when you factor that in with the other, say, 4 classrooms, that reduces the average class size from, say, 25 down to what's being listed at like 20. It's just an arcane, it does. But if you look at it individually for the classroom teachers, you'll see what they're faced with. But if you're just trying to capture that average class size, you're missing the story. That's my only point on that. Okay. Any other comments?
Just a couple of follow-ups, if I could.
Yeah, Brendan, go.
So, Harvey, just to go back to the, I think I know the answer. I just want to, in the interest of looking under every stone, for the sound system aidable question, the same uncertainty about whether it would be aidable or not would apply to funding it, let's say, out of the capital reserve fund. Is that correct? Like, you'd have to go through the same
Same
hoop?
scenario.
Same,
Yeah,
same
it's just
hoop,
where the money's
different-
coming from.
Different side, yeah.
Right.
Okay. And I know I just can't, my mind can't accept these cliffhangers that you leave us on. So if memory serves, the average rollover budget has been an increase of roughly $1 million each year. Does that number sounds about right?
You
won't
that
do
would be
it.
that would be coincidental.
Okay.
Okay. Every year is separate and distinct.
Yeah. Got it. We'll just have to wait until this lens becomes a little clearer. Yeah.
I did
I've
want
got
to.
all this math. It's all variables. I don't even know what it means.
I hear you. The one thing I just wanted to add before we finish up here, there was a question about why there isn't anything with regards to like transfer to capital. Okay, so we've seen that in the past. The reason for that is you will see something. You might recall, but it's not a new ask. Last year, you might recall, we said we were going to replace all the interior doors. Okay, that project was about 1.2 million. Last year, really this year, we funded half of that. We will be funding the other half. You will see that when we get into the numbers. The other thing that you're going to see in transfer to capital is an expense for about $31,000. That expense is really more of a repair, but the state education department is requiring us to count it as a capital project. So here's the reverse of that auditorium sound system. We have at the middle school, we have a careers room, classroom. It is probably, if you went in there, you'd feel like you're going back to when Betty Crocker got started. It's literally that old looking, and it's just not functional anymore. We want to move to another room that used to be the computer lab. The problem is not so much the appliances and all that, but we have to vent all the appliances outside. Immediately now, it gets into the realm of state education approval. The project itself is probably about, of that 31,000, it's probably in the high teens, is to pay the architect to do all the preliminary drawings and all the filings and all that. It's terrible. I tried to get around it, but I just couldn't. So it's really critical that we take care of this because that room is really not functional, and it hasn't been for a short while. So that's what you're going to see when we get into the numbers, those two items. Okay?
Great, thank you for that, Harvey. And Terry, thank you for putting this all together. Harvey, you walked us through what a great kickoff to budget season, and look forward to the future presentations. Well done. Okay, that then takes us to the rest of the agenda, engagement survey. So you've probably noticed that there's been some changes to the earlier agenda. I think something was on the consent agenda, came off, and now is on the non-consent agenda. That has to do with the survey resolution. Does anyone need a quick review of the survey? I think we've gone through the process of looking what was out there. We identified a vendor that we think is quality and well-renowned, and will provide a service to us that hopefully will pay some serious dividends for a very effective and efficient cost to us. Their numbers have slightly changed since I think last we met. They increased by, I want to say, about $500. So the total expense that we would incur over a 2-year period would be about $25.5 thousand, of which would be split a little bit this year, a little bit next year. That in and of itself is under COSERV, so that is actually state aidable based on the arcane algorithm that Harvey was mentioning, which means that we're probably going to see about 70-some% of that return to us over next year and the year following, because there's that one year lag from the expense. So I think it's structured in an affordable way. The proposal itself shows again that we have 4 constituent groups broken down into instructional staff, non-instructional staff, our students, and families that we will go out with here in short order to survey. And once that data gets reconciled, we'll come back and we'll be able to have a meaningful discussion at the board. We'll do that this year. I believe we've asked them to have it concluded in a way that would be supportive of like the budget. So to have it done before the end of March, I think they've assured us that could actually, if we get the respondents and we get enough crowd support, that they would be able to accommodate that. So there would be actually a report for April for us to noodle about. So that's where we are. They're ready to go. You may have seen the email traffic back and forth about support documents and letters of agreement. Terry just clarified before the start of the meeting that the document that was posted to board docs is sufficient from a letter of agreement or a contractual nature for us to go forward with taking an action on this tonight. So with that, any questions from a background? And just for clarity, we're on new business, non-consent agenda, item number 1, which is engagement survey, which is just the discussion part.
So are we now turning this into a resolution to vote on? Is that what you're suggesting?
That will be number 2 on the agenda, which is,
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
yeah, it was in the consent agenda, and we've moved it from the consent agenda to the non-consent agenda.
I just glanced and thought it was the strategic discussion. Or, yeah.
We'll have that too?
Yeah.
That'll be item number 3.
I wasn't turning my paper
For those
over.
staying,
I'm
watching
having
at
a bad
home.
run with not reading all the words tonight.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, please. Christine?
As it relates to the engagement survey, is it clear what the work burden will be for the administration and staff as it relates to setup and, you know, all the back end things that have to happen? Has that been outlined, and is the administration and staff prepared to fit that into their
So,
time?
so in terms of specific project plan, we haven't had that kickoff meeting. The reason why we selected this vendor was to minimize the impact to staff. I think most of the benefit or the hard work will be on the back end, where there'll be information and suggested action steps that maybe staff would need to think about somewhat. But my sense is, when it comes to the conduct of the survey and the support, it's going to be driven by Tripod, otherwise known as PCL or PLC.
So,
But there will be coordination meetings that will occur.
Yeah.
And that typically, I think, will consist of Terry, myself, and Jim.
okay.
Because a
the-
lot of that has to do with messaging and sending out notifications. And
So
there will be
beyond-
some requirements from just do we have, emails
Yeah, so-
and all that contact information so that they can go out. But we have yet to decide, is it QR codes and emails, or is it QR codes, emails, et cetera? That still needs to be worked out, and that will happen over the next 2 weeks.
So I'm not as worried about that. I guess what I would just hope is in the contract is really clear deliverables and clearly like what is expected of the district as it relates to information they need to get this going. That's all. So like getting emails is one thing, but I just want to make sure that the district is prepared to do whatever lifting is necessary, because we won't be able to do it on the board, right? We don't have the data. So I just want to make
Correct.
sure that they've outlined that and that everyone feels comfortable with what is being asked. That's all.
Okay, fair point. Christian?
Just my question is there a survey instrument that's or pre-written, or are we looking at the items that are going to be on it? Or is a survey more or less set, or is this something that's going to be developed between us agreeing to it and then actually going out to the stakeholders?
Right, so that's a great question. So as I understand it, Terry, you correct me where I'm wrong. This survey is time-tested and benchmarked, and they have actually refined the actual question and the size of the survey itself for the 3 primary groups, which are instructional staff, the students, and families. The only customization that we're going to need to do is for non-instructional staff, because that's not something that they had in their toolkit. It had more to do with their own strategic plan and what their focus is on. So to answer your question, yeah, I think we'll be okay. Brendan?
Yeah, just to clarify what we want to do with the results and when. So results coming in April. Obviously, we're going to be in the middle of the meat of budget season. Have we thought through? I think again, just those 2 ideas of tangibly, what do we want to do with this, and when do we want to do it? Is that over the summer? Are we going to try to fit that in the middle of budget season?
So I refer to the document, and the purpose of the document was oriented on getting a leg up on strategic planning, right? To get feedback from the main constituent groups that you need input on, data from, right? To move forward with the strategic plan. And we're going to talk about the strategic planning a little bit. So there's right now parallel tracks of efforts going on or about to go on, and at some point, those two tracks come together. Brendan, my sense is that will happen before May or around May, where one will have data, and data collection is part of the strategic planning process. So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves in terms of strategic planning, but we're going to kill a couple birds with one stone, right? But it's all focused on the future and trying to figure out what we could do better, not just from planning, but also from a resource perspective, right? So identify those things. So I don't want to give the impression that we are not going to do this, okay? And what is this? We are not going to take the information that we receive and act upon it. I think once we get it, and I don't want to, we have to figure out how we're going to incorporate that into the strategic plan. And if you would, hold on to that question again, and when I get into the strategic planning initiative and the process, the timeline that we've laid out here as a primer, see if that kind of captures your question.
I appreciate how it would fit into that other process. I guess the only concern that I have or issue that I can see, if we're going into budget season and we have this survey that's just concluded, there's going to be portions of the community say, well, what does the survey say? And it almost as if like my vote on the budget depends on, what is in that survey. And I just don't want to be caught flat-footed when that part of it comes. We might be thinking of this only as a tool to serve the strategic plan, but I think that is probably going to be out there in some way, expressed in some way in the month prior to the budget. So if we can be more clear about just where this fits in, I think that would help answer that question. So it's not seen as if like, oh, they got the results and they didn't share them because they didn't like what they saw, something like that. As long as we're just transparent about where this all fits and just make that very clear so that not only we understand it, but that everybody understands it, and they'll just know that everything is moving along as was originally planned. That's all.
Yep, and I think that's a fair point, and it's going to require a lot of channeling of information going forward, and I think we're up for the task on that collectively. Anyone else? Bass?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, the timing, I mean, to Brendan's point, we have to go through the budgeting process. We are doing these engagement surveys and everything, I mean, the stakeholders, and so they're going in parallel, and for people who would say, why didn't you take whatever the results of the survey into account? Well, timing is like we can change the timing. So we can do an exercise where we say, it just happened that with our vision that we, again, just happened that this budget happens to take care of few concerns out of the survey already, and the remaining part is going to be factored in next year and next budget. So we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. No, it's gonna affect the budget, so whatever happens this year happens, and the remaining part will be taken care of next year.
Yeah, so I agree with that, Bass. I think a term that I'd ask you to consider is it's a building block. This survey is a building block towards a grander design. And that grander design would be a plan that would help guide the district in a whole host of ways. We heard talk about staffing tonight, right, in terms of the needs assessment. Well, we know facilities is talking about improving our buildings, right? And this document would be somewhat a single source document to cover all those different elements, whether it be facilities, whether it be instructional, whether it be staffing, et cetera. And so, but that's on the strategic plan side. This is survey, the purpose of this survey is to help us get a sense of where we are, to benchmark where, one, we see ourselves and where others see us, right? Where we see ourselves, where the instructional and non-instructional staff see us. Okay, what about where the students see us? And where do the families see us? That's valuable information. And to think that we would take that and immediately do something in the budget, it doesn't occur, right? It takes time to incorporate a plan to identify what the needs are, similar to what Terry has done tonight. This is a little bit broader scope in that instead of looking just from the in-house perspective of what we need, we're asking people on the outside as well to provide their input. So it's a building block toward a broader built house, I think. Terry, you got some?
Yeah, having done this in the district before, I would recommend holding true to what John said. I would go as far as to say we will not be acting on a budget item based on these results, period. The deliverable from the scope says April 2024. That's way too close for comfort for this board to deliberate, action plan, cost it out. That's too much static. So I think we just put that out there that, you know, the deliverable is April at the earliest. And the other thing that I would say is there's different levels of information that folks will be getting. At the board level, you're really looking for information from parents and community that talks about how the district operates, communication, transparency, things of that nature. You're not going to be acting on what students are saying about teachers per se or a school by school basis. That's really for the administration to start to tackle based on their individual school report. So I'll just say, you know, as an assistant superintendent, I met with principals to go over their survey results to talk about action items that you could take as a school that might address some needs from the survey. That didn't go to the board because it was so in the weeds. It was at the school level. What the board looked at was communication mechanisms came out of parent supports. How do I find information other than going to a board meeting? When we're making budget decisions, how are we really getting information from all parents? Those are things that would kind of rise to the board level. So I just think John is right. This is step one, and it's not going to impact the 24-25 budget process, but you know, really kick off that strategic planning piece that we'll get to next.
So let me just knock on wood, right? Hearing what Terry just said, the hope, the desire would be it wouldn't impact, right? I never say never, though. I've learned that in life, that never say never. You never know what might come out of when you ask simple questions. So, and thank you, Terry, for that. In terms of what the board does, I just want to clarify. If it pertains to a school, the board will see that, okay? If it pertains to a specific classroom, so to speak, other than the fact that certain, you know, schools have feedback that look like A, B, and C, it's not going to be attributed down to the specific classroom and the like. So the visibility of this is going to be kind of appropriate for the board level, which is, I think, a different way of saying what I think Terry said, but consistent with the theme there, just to be clear. Okay? All right, so any other discussion on that item? Now, there is a resolution that is in the agenda, number 2. It says Stakeholder Survey 2024 Resolution. And I'll just take that as per the writing of that resolution, as well as the attachment, which was, as Terry said, the support document associated with that. Could I have a motion for that? Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Great, motion passed. Well, thank you for that, everyone. I think it's an important step for the district, and like we said, the whole purpose about this is to learn stuff about ourselves that we didn't know, and at least establish a data record so that now we have, instead of the anecdotal word, we have hardcore data that we can hang our hat on in terms of being responsive to not only our students, but also our community. Okay, with that, I'd like to then move on to the strategic plan discussion, which is a great dovetail, segue. Before you is a document that Terry, Jim, and I noodled about. And I just want to recall for everybody that as part of board goals, we established looking into a strategic plan. And the first step toward that would be to put together a roadmap to how a strategic planning process might look. And so what you have before you is what I'll call a primer. I think the document itself says initial steps. Do we need to put it up on the big screen I see everybody on their phones here, so I'm assuming the audience is looking at it. So I'll just talk through it. And so the slide number 2, overview. Slide number 3, definitions. The reason why I put definitions, I know when we first had our conversation, I think in the summer, there was some discussion over what strategic plans are and what strategic planning is about. And what I wanted to do is just from a common reference, put us all on the same sheet of music, I hope, the same page, by listing out how the district intends to define strategic planning. And I think the easiest way to think about it is actually in academic research that says strategic planning is a disciplined approach to produce decisions and actions that shape and guide what an organization is, what it does, and why it does it. I think we all know why we're here, and we know what we do, and we know why we do it. But we don't have a single source document that we can refer to to have that discussion with folks. And I think by going through the steps, the process, to develop a strategic plan, we are going to probably help ourselves in our discussions with the community and with our discussions with families and with our employees in terms of who we are, what we do, and why we do it. And so I'm not looking for this to be a revamp, if you will, of Cornwall Central School District, but just a codification, if you will, a documentation of providing more than just an annual review of budget decisions, but look at it more holistically over a period of time. And I think that will give ourselves some degrees of freedom, one as a board, but also enhance the necessary trust and confidence that I think all stakeholders need, not just in the district, but also in the process and in the direction of where this district is going. So I think it's going to further enhance, as Terry mentioned earlier, continuously improve our valuable, strong position. In terms of what a strategic plan looks like, you see on this slide the key components: mission statement, vision statement, a listing of what our core values are, an environmental analysis, of which that survey that we're talking about would be part of the data collection efforts for that. Then goals and objectives that we would establish based on that assessment of not just internal issues, but also external issues as well. And then figuring out how we should act, how we can allocate the necessary resources, and then, you know, the monitoring and then the evolution, which is the refinement over time. So this would be a working document, basically, that would kind of set out a direction that would be not just year to year, but over a 3 to 5 year horizon, that when we defer something like, let's say, the sound system, there's a reason why it's happening in year 2 versus year 1, similar to what we saw with the facilities. A lot of the building blocks, I think, the district already has in place. We just need to find a way to tie it all together in one common, easily understood and referenceable document. All right, so the next slide is purpose. I think I've covered all that in various stages tonight. But I'll highlight the third bullet, which is really to create an actionable blueprint, right? That has a horizon to it, 3 to 5 year in nature, with the sole purpose, which is bullet number 4 here, to contribute to our continuing success. Okay, the other document, slide number 5, talks about a myriad of benefits. I'm not going to list them all. The bottom line is we distill our needs and our aspirations into what's achievable. You know, this is a lot of what gets organizations in trouble is they have a great appetite for change, but a lot of that change isn't achievable based on the resources that you have. And so the focus really in this process is to understand what our needs are, address those, understand what our aspirations are, and figure out what's achievable over what time frame. In terms of specific costs, slide 6 now, I believe that the costs can be managed within the budgetary considerations. The one item that I do think comes out of this for 2024-25 budget is, hey, how much are we going to spend in 24-25 on this initiative, right? Much to Christine's point or question about, you know, what does it do to existing staff? Most organizations hire external facilitators to help kind of guide the process. It will require input from all avenues at the district, all walks of life. But a facilitator helps guide that process, captures all that good information, and then guides us along the way towards establishing what the goals are, as well as helping find a way to develop an associated plan with that. I'm not sure what the cost of that is. I've talked to a variety of different folks. Some of those folks are the ones that we actually asked proposals on the survey. The ranges I got were from $35,000 to over $100,000 for that effort. My belief is probably somewhere in between there, maybe $35,000 to maybe $50,000 over some horizon would be spent possibly on that. We'll know for sure when we actually go out and start talking to these organizations with a concrete idea of what we want to achieve. That's great. Thank you, Jim. Similar to the survey, this type of initiative is aidable. So again, for every dollar we spend, we get about 3/4 of it back from the state, which is important to keep in mind. Thank you for that, Jim. So let's go to slide 7, which is the strategic planning process. What we've done here is we've broken it up into about an 8-step process consisting of 4 phases. For those who are not familiar with the strategic planning process, the first thing is to basically clarify who you are and what you do. So you see that as on the top at 12 o'clock, clarify our mission, our vision, and our core values. We have two of those threes already established, codified. And I think we clarified it earlier in the year, those two. The one thing that we don't have is the core values thing, which is going to be determined through the use of engagement, discussions, and forums and the like. Then we move into the data collection. The survey obviously would play a big part of it, but there's a lot of other data that needs to get collected that we, I believe, already have. Building survey, facilities, capital plan, phases, all that stuff. But we also have external environmental factors to also consider, such as the zero emission bus initiative and the like. This notion of fund balances, that's another issue that we're limited currently by at 4%. I have to find a way to get legislative help to bump that up to make, I think, not only the board's work easier, but also Harvey's job a lot easier if he has more than 4% to have at his disposal. That would complete phase one, and as we move into phase two, set goals and priorities, and then once those goals and priorities are established, then we get into, well, how do we get there? Which would include specific objectives and measures that support those goals. Some of those objectives would be happening over the course of the strategic plan, and some of them might be happening year one or year two or year three, depending on how those goals are established and the support that would be necessary to achieve them. Once we've developed that, we would then move into the drafting and the refining and adopting of that plan. That whole process from phases 1 through 3, I believe could be done in a year's time frame with the help of an external facilitator. And I say that because we have much of that information already. It's just a matter of collecting it and then organizing it. But still, just to put it in terms of expectation, it would probably, once we would start the process, it would probably take a year to work through it in a coherent and deliberate manner. I mean, you could have it tomorrow. You could have a strategic plan tomorrow, but the utility of it would be pretty small. And as I said, I want this to be a document that has great utility to moving us forward, but also is workable in terms of if something needs to change, we should feel compelled to be able to change it down the road, years 2 or 3, as situation changes or new needs arise. And then once we implement the plan, which would, as I see it, probably from a school year perspective, be at the advent of a school year, we're talking probably school year 25, 26 at the earliest that would be able to be implementable. And then the last step in that is what you always do. Once you start something, you monitor it to see how you're doing, make refinements and adjustments as necessary. The actual roadmap is, and it's not actual, I should use the term, and not even proposed, but an example of a roadmap that I think would orient well with our needs is found on slide 8. It breaks down the 4 phases into phase 1, preparation, phase 2, strategic development, phase 3, plan construction, phase 4, implement and monitor, with specific steps that were in the previous slide a little bit more specifically detailed. One could argue that for that roadmap, we didn't need to go into such detail. That would be our next step. as we look to migrate toward a project plan and the like. But I just wanted to put it out there as an example of what are the actions that we would be embarking on and getting assistance with from an external facilitator. I'm just going to stop right there. That's a lot to digest. It's a work in progress, like all things. We did set February as our objective to at least come together and have a consensus on this roadmap. This is the first meeting of 2 in February. But I think it's important, especially given Brendan's question about how does the survey fit, and you can see that specific to that, if you look under preparation, step 2, stakeholder engagement and data collection. Conduct surveys, focus groups, meetings to gather insights and perspectives. The surveys would go a long way toward helping us with that. Step 2, even though we're not officially in a strategic planning sequence, right? It's one of the smart things you do when you're trying to move the ball forward and do formulate a strategic plan. So, any questions?
First question I would have, John, do we have another school district, an example from another school district so we can see what an end product looks like? Part of what I'm trying to imagine is like, what specificity do they get to? You know, what level of recommendations do they offer? Just to kind of know where we're going, not to say that ours would have to model someone else's, but just understanding what this looks like, particularly in a public entity. You know, I think on a corporate side, it's a little easier to think of what a strategic plan would look like when a lot of that information, a lot of those recommendations would be proprietary. But in this context, knowing that what I'm concerned about is that anything that would be so specific as to be directional and very useful, it would not make sense to include in this plan because it would undercut us. For instance, let's say one of the recommendations in the plan is you've got a big demographic bump, you need to buy property to expand your school district, right? And then based on that, we go out and we start looking for property, and so a developer says to us, or whoever owns land, and oh, well, it looks like you need to do this. The price just went up 25% because I see this listed in your strategic document. We just kind of shot ourselves in the foot, didn't we? That would be the kind of information that you would want to keep under the vest if you're operating, you know, solely in the interest of getting the best deal. I'm using that just as an illustrative example. So basically, I want to know, like, what do these look like in this specific industry and context? What's advisable? And just kind of go from there. It's just hard for me to form an opinion without seeing what is best practice, not only for strategic plans, but for small government entities, essentially.
Sure. So it's a fair question about front running, and so I think because that's what you described, right? You basically telegraphed what your needs are going to be, and so everyone knows it, and next thing you know is prices go up. That's in the trade, that's known as front running, by the way. So anything that would be used against the district that would be confidential in nature, which I would think such a tell, right, would be characterized in a way that it wouldn't be obvious, right? Using demographics, for instance. So we have a study out there right now that suggests that I think the district's supposed to decline by 22%. Right? That was performed in 2017. Imagine if that study wasn't minus 22%, it was actually plus 22%. That information is probably worthy of public awareness. How we act and how we disclose that in terms of strategic planning, of how it all works, would not necessarily be specifically oriented about purchase of property and the like. So I understand your concern about putting the district in a disadvantaged state, and anything that would be shared with the public, much like our security plans, right? They would be considered close hold. So hopefully that addresses question number one. Question number
Well, I hope
Question
that,
number two.
I hope that that's the case. Is all I'm saying, that we
Which-
don't run into any limitations on like what we can consider proprietary, but to be explored later. And that's what, seeing what other districts have done could help answer
Yeah.
that. But to point
So-
number two.
So to question number two, which was what have other districts done? A lot of districts do have strategic plans. They come in all shapes and sizes. And I can tell you that some are good, that I read it, I'm like, wow, you know, as a taxpayer, I would feel comfortable with this. And I look at others and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not sure what it really is, that document, but I hope they didn't pay any money for it because it's not really worth the paper it was written on. So my hope would be that we would have a document at the end of the day that not only would provide the community a single source document to refer to in terms of who we are, what we do, and where we're going, but also what we're gonna have to do to get there. And like I said, we have right now disparate parts of this existing, but it's not in that single source. I would hope that when we complete that process, we would have the external facilitator and any third party who would be disinterested, right? Look at that plan and say, oh, Cornwall, you know what? They have a great reputation, and that document really lives up to the Cornwall reputation. That would be my hope.
If I can make one request, and
Sure.
we can follow up through email about those districts that have done it. It could be interesting to reach out to those that have done it well, and maybe even those who haven't done it well, just to compare their process and just learn from them what worked. I'm sure everybody went into it thinking that they had the right approach, and some of them turned out to be wrong. So knowing where they may have went awry could be helpful in formulating our own process.
Yeah, good point. Bass, then Christian.
Thanks, John. I have 3 questions. Number one is like this draft development, just like to be clear, 3, like you, Jim, and Terry worked on developing this, like what we're looking at, those 7, 8 pages, or?
Correct.
Okay. So that's 1. 2, what's your kind of, how do you envision the review process to go? Like, should we go take it as a homework and give you, like, kind of, highlight our, questions, changes, edits? I mean, what do you like us to do as a committee, as a board? And number 3, when you have kind of parallel what Brandon was saying, but I was like looking at it from a different angle. As a community member, right? When I see this strategic plan published, adopted, it's a kind of, is it a legal document? That's my question. If it's a legal document, somebody might come and say, you did not fulfill one of the goals you said you want to do, and I was harmed, and I want to sue you. What do you do?
So it's an interesting question. Currently, we have goals that we have established currently that are on the website between the board and the superintendent. Those goals would be another building block toward a strategic plan, in that it's a component of a strategic plan. So we already have those things that we say we're going to do elicited. In terms of the legality thing, I guess we could go back. I know, I don't want to be quick with a response other than saying that we'll go back and we'll find out what the harm is. But then the question becomes, what's the harm of currently having established goals? I think the harm is not having established goals, not having a strategic plan. And so I know anyone can sue anyone for anything, right? We live in a litigious world. But I don't think legally, if anything, we're probably more in compliance with what the legal requirements are from the state as it pertains to the various requirements for things, than if we were not to do this. But in terms of your first question, which is, what are we going to do with this? It's a discussion. And so as we move to, like, my last slide here, which says next steps, hey, now that we have just basically a roadmap that's not set in stone, but kind of a guide, right? Next steps would be, hey, we proceed to objective 2 of that goal, which says, hey, we'll create a project plan document that identifies the key tasks, share the stakeholders, participants, governance structure, inputs, resources, timelines, and work required to create a multi-year strategic plan by May. So part of that would be, to answer your question, is, well, where do we go from here? What do you want? I want a continuing conversation about the utility of doing this. I feel very strongly that we should have a strategic plan. This district should have a strategic plan. And we should have a community that's aware of that strategic plan, who's participated in that strategic plan, and we're all in this together. I feel very strongly about it. I think it would help unite us as a district, because I think there are a lot of things that divide us that really don't rise to the level that we should spend a lot of time on. And then, as another part of that next step, research vendors, which over that time frame between February and May, we'd reach out to people. Jim actually had a great idea as we were working through this document to reach out to the firm that's a niche consultant in the education K through 12 space. They looked at this document, they looked at the roadmap, and they said that this aligns very well with the process that they follow when they're actually doing strategic planning consulting with other school districts across the country. So that was nice feedback from them. And then, we just provide progress updates at our next time we meet in March. That's kind of like the way forward. But in terms of questions, we're just starting is my point on this, right? We're just embarking on a trip, and the purpose of it all is to get everybody, not just the board and Terry and administrators and the teachers, but the whole community on the same page.
Yeah, thanks. The document itself, those, like, I can't remember, 9 slides or total, or 8?
Yeah.
Do you seek having our input, like, becomes like a peer-reviewed document, or not? I mean, this is kind of, I'm talking like practically. I mean, yeah, we can sit here and talk. I mean, we can talk till, the sunrise, but like, do you want us to really kind of send it back to you, edited, and
So
or not? I mean, this is
again, this is a primer, so it's called Initial Steps for a reason. It's to elicit thought, right? So it's trying to get us on the same page about what strategic planning is, what a strategic plan might look like towards, here's a process that one could follow that, over a 12-month horizon, we could probably develop it. And the next step would be, hey, here's a project plan, do we want to do it? And if the answer is we do want to do it, hopefully we would be able to go ahead and embark on this, knowing that we have some building blocks that have already been kind of put together for us. Feedback is always invaluable, but I think about the destination is this something that we as a board feel comfortable pursuing, right? Do you think the benefits of pursuing a strategic planning process that would result in a strategic plan, would those benefits outweigh the costs associated with doing it? Or vice versa? I think that's an important place to get to, and I look to get to that place hopefully soon, within like the next
Yeah, I mean,
2
my,
months.
maybe I just wrap it up for just my input tonight is two points. I see that, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, the stakeholder survey is a big piece. You like to use the term building blocks. The biggest building block I can say is the stakeholder survey, because that's gonna kind of like guide the whole thing, how, from start to finish in a way. Another thing got my attention is like facilitator towards $100,000. I think that's too much. I mean, like, is it?
I'd agree.
Would it be money well spent? I'm not sure.
I would agree with that assessment. I just put the cost down there to try to provide a bookend for you, for all of us, right? And I don't know what it is until we go out and ask for, a proposal, much like we did with the survey. And I can tell you from the survey, the results that we got from the survey, the ranges, I believe, went from $8,000 to over $65,000. So I think we're pretty judicious in making sure that we go not just to one source, but multiple sources to, once we've defined what it is we're trying to do, to see what a fair number would look like. And then, once we have that number, then, hey, is this something we think we want to do? And if we want to do it, then when are we going to do it? Those are the questions yet to be, I think, answered.
So
But
my final-
this is part of our what I'll call roadmap.
My
get
final
there.
contribution, which I already said, just to underscore, I do think that we should add as not just a suggestion, but maybe a step in this, is consulting other districts that have gone through it. I just don't want to rely on vendors to tell us why this is such a great idea. I'm assuming they have a well-honed pitch that is meant to part us with our money. So hearing from them, you mentioned determining whether this is a worthwhile thing to do, and I would say at what scale. What's the breaking point where it's no longer worth it financially? To Bass's point, I think that's something we can maybe not only get from talking to those that have done it before, but I think it would be our best single source of information, as opposed to, again, kind of imagining it ourselves and then consulting consultants, who again obviously have a vested interest in us doing this. So if we could add that, if we have 2 months to get to where you're talking about, I think that's more than enough time to add in a step of reaching. I know that back in the audit committee days, when we were looking for taking RFPs and then looking into other auditors, we had a crack squad of those going out and calling our contemporaries on other boards and just getting a sense of, hey, how did that go and what would you do differently? I found during that process it was very helpful, and board members on other boards and other districts were more than willing to share their experience with us. So I don't think it wouldn't push anything back as far as the timeline goes, and I think would give us a lot of great insight.
Sure, not a problem, I don't think. I've been looking over here only because I've been, Richard? Oh, first, okay, thank you.
He's had his hand on the button.
Yeah, sorry, Christian,
so
go ahead.
Just to start with, just to kind of address what Brendan brought up, and if I had to suggest a good example of this, I would look at Menard School District in the Capital Region, not because I think the content of their goals of their strategic plan is particular, but they're one of the good examples of districts that actually uses their strategic plan. It's updated, they benchmark it, it provides a basis for their discussions. I share Brendan's caution, because I think what happens is a lot of strategic plans generate a very long document that gets in a PDF file that's lost in some link on the district website that no one looks at, including the board and the administration, and it's just a check and lost money. And I think, I would give you an example that I think that's worth, and I would gladly share the link with that. But I like to make an argument for strategic planning and what I think it is. I don't think it's about a commitment to policies. I think it's about laying out priorities, about what do we do. So when we have money, what is the next thing that we're going to address? And I think what it does is that it creates better conversations because there's a focus point for people to say, this is what we are trying to do. And both among the people, the members of the board and the administration, the staff, is that we kind of have an idea where we're going, what port are we sailing to? And even if a storm comes up, we know to take our bearings and get back to our ultimate goal, which is that port, even if we have to take a longer way around. And by doing that, I also think it builds trust for two different reasons. Whenever something happens, and I need to put a caveat here, I'm not saying this is actually what it is, but just to look at our needs assessment. Well, Lee Road got a kindergarten teacher. My children go to COH. Why are they getting all the good stuff? And then it seems like it's being reactive, and it also seems like you don't know where the origin of the policy or the priority is. And therefore, people speculate, and they come up with lots of different reasons, and they say someone's getting paid off. And it's hard for them to understand the outcomes of decisions. And I think having a plan there lays out that traceability to why we are going at something, and also, I think, a time frame to achieve it, because a lot of things in education can't be achieved in a single year. And I think a big fault of education decision-making in the United States is that it's too reactive because they go out every year to set their budget. And so they're very reactive to, small events that occur in a year that lead to a lot of wasting money. And I know this because I used to work at a BOCES, which had a 3-year budget horizon versus a 1-year budget horizon. And when the financial crisis occurred in 2008, it was able to allocate resources and use that as an opportunity to reinvest, and as opposed to where a lot of school districts cut back and they actually suffered long-term as a result of that. And then the second thing about trust, I think, is that what the social psychologist Tom Tyler said about why people trust the outcome of a process. And he came to a point, he said, it's not because you benefit from the outcome. He said, people don't actually, that's not what people care about. They care about what he called procedural trust. They know that there was a process, they can see the process, and therefore, hey, you had your day in court, or it went through, a bill becomes a law, and then even if it's not something that they personally like, they can accept that how it was arrived to. And I think that having a strategic plan provides that framework for us, and it's not necessarily that we're going to commit to building an elementary school by a certain date, but it lets us kind of have a statement of our priorities, and if people disagree, it allows for better public comment, it allows for us to evaluate where we've come from, and not just last year to this year. So I'm a big proponent of strategic planning. That doesn't mean we will do it well, but I think it's, to take a phrase, it's a worthwhile Canadian initiative. And if you don't get the joke, it's the idea that it's good enough for Canada, but maybe not the United States. But I do think it's, it's a policy wonk joke. But the point about it is, I think that this will make the efficiency gain will make up for whatever cost it takes us to initiate this. And then what we do with it is up to us as a board, a school district, and a community. And there's no guarantee of that, but that's what we're committed to starting.
Yeah, thank you for that, Christian. I think the board committed earlier in the year to deal with this situation, right? To come to a position as it pertains to this. And I think this is just a wake point toward that day. And that day is quickly approaching based on our goals and the timelines that we established back in the beginning of the year. So thank you for that. Christine?
Christian, thank you. It was really very well stated. I just want to make a couple comments. I really, Brendan's point about a corporate versus, a school entity doing this, there is a lot to be thought of in that respect. I think many of us have done strategic plans at a corporate level. I would not presume to know the best practice as it relates to doing it in a public entity like this, right? I think there are nuances that I don't know that any of us have done that before. Maybe we have, but I think that I want to be aware of that. I think it is really important that we talk to other districts who have done this. I think that goes back to the trust and to all of us understanding what's involved in a strategic plan. We might have some high-level understanding, but to really understand what are the different roles and responsibilities that other folks designated and provided would be helpful. And when I think of this, as everyone was talking, it made me think about, when we have our capital projects, we hire a project management team. They come in and do all the heavy lifting. We're there for oversight, to ask the tough questions, to make sure that it's covering, all of the agreed upon objectives. And I think that a strategic plan done well, and much to what Christian described, the benefits of it warrant that same level of attention and oversight. So I think that, John, I really appreciate the work that went into this. I know not just the intellectual content, but the formatting alone can take an hour or so, so I really do appreciate that. I caution us not to be so driven by the timeline we set back in September when we didn't have as much information. I think the best thing we can do is that's what we're striving for, but as we learn more or as we come to an awareness as a group more, we are, I don't want to say justified, but it is smart to maybe push out our timeline as long as we're continuing to work on it. I don't want to rush to get this done by February or March, because that's what we said, when it might benefit us and make it better for all of us to understand, to put a couple other things in place first. So for consideration, I think that it would be beneficial to talk to some others.
Talk with others, that's.
And to also start to get some ideas from vendors before we go too far down on our own.
When you say talk with vendors,
Talk with people that do this, like.
Right.
Like,
Okay, I think I understand.
like RFP it or, whatever. Yeah.
Looking for proposals
Yeah.
and in terms of guidance. Just to clarify one thing, this issue, it's come up twice now, this notion of corporate versus
School, government.
school, government, nonprofit. But the similar to the people that we've talked to about the survey, a lot of different, consultants are out there. There are consultants that actually specialize in school strategic planning. Yeah. This document was actually reviewed by one of those. And so what you see before you is in line with what I would call school roadmap, not a corporate roadmap.
And I don't mean to imply otherwise. I think
I just wanted to
it's great
clarify.
feedback. Yeah, I think that
So,
was
so there was,
great due diligence.
there was that loop.
Yeah, and that's, I appreciate that. I think that was really great due diligence to have them take a look at it. And, a great pat on the back for all the work you guys did, that it really is a vision to what they would recommend. I just think now it's their turn to carry the baton, right? Because now it's when we got to really get the rubber to the road, and we all have other competing priorities to be able to carry this month to month as designed. I think it's a lot.
So you're for just moving the initiative forward. Is that what I understand you to say? Not to put words in your mouth, but you seem to be supportive of engaging in a strategic planning process.
Oh, yeah, that was never in question for me from the beginning.
Okay.
I'm concerned about how we go about doing it. That's all.
Right, which was what
Yeah.
the next steps that I think when we built the goal and specified. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thank you so much, Christine. All right, Richard, go.
Yeah, real quick. I don't want to repeat what others have said because it's late enough. But, I agree with the trust factor, right? It can gain trust in the community. It can unite people, but only if we do it the right way. And I look at, like step number 2, I don't want to get into details because we're not really there yet. But, the survey, the engagement survey is going to be a huge part of that. Focus groups, meetings, forums. I think we need to almost have a strategic plan for engagement for the strategic plan. Because if we don't involve everyone, all the stakeholders, then it's not going to be a strong, successful plan, in my opinion. So we have to make sure to carefully plan that out. And like, what do focus groups look like? What are we looking for? How do we communicate it out that we're seeking people to join these groups? So I just think maybe at some point when we move forward, make that more detailed and have a specific plan, whether we're working with the communication committee or it's run by, the administration.
Yeah, Richard, I think that's a fair point. The devil is always in the details, right? The step that you cited, lists just the objective and the key results. How that comes about is exactly what you what's the plan for that to come
Yeah,
about?
and it might be too early now to go into detail, but, it's in month 2 of once
Right.
we start, so we have to probably get moving on that sooner than later.
Well, so again, this is kind of a guide. If you see like this would take a month to do, that's in general. It may not be for us, and right. The trick is to take something that's generic in nature and then customize it to our purpose, and that's where the rubber hits the road. And I think as we talk with vendors who are in this and do this, as well as other school districts that have gone through the process, we'll be able to make refinements such that quote-unquote plan document that's yet to come would be a little bit more useful than in terms of a primer like this document. Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. That's right. Anybody else on that? So I think if yeah, go Jim. Yeah.
I will be quick and echo Richard's sentiments. It's getting a little late. Christian, I really agree, with your thoughts of why it's important. Brendan, really love your strategy. My dad always says, copy off the smart kids. Not like literally when you're in school, don't cheat kids, but look at other people that have these plans. And I think I'll take that as, and John and I could talk about that. And, if you just Google New York State school strategic plan, you will get a whole host of these. And some of them are really awful. They're like a page and a half, and they're just, completely worthless. And some of them are pretty darn good. So, but I sort of envision it as sort of a, now we do the board goals and the superintendent goals. It's sort of a 3 to 5 year version of that to do it in short. And maybe a little more detail than that in certain areas, but that's sort of the goal, is not to do it in that year to year, but put something together on a little, on the medium time frame. So those are my quick thoughts.
Yep, thanks, Jim. So to try to just move it forward, I just want to, again, we're starting out having this discussion, right? We put this as a goal. This specific objective was to talk about what a roadmap would look like. Let me just look at everybody and see if we can get to a position where, how does everyone feel about what they're seeing here? How are they feeling about continuing to move forward? How do they feel about what we have here in terms of what the next steps are, which I thought was on the last slide. Slide number 9 talks about refining and working on a more detailed plan, researching vendors that would serve to facilitate that planning process, help organize us, and as well as be the project manager, so to speak, of this initiative, and then provide updates as we go along. Is this DOA, as they say, or is this something that we want to continue to invest time and effort in? Christian?
I think it would be. At the beginning of the year, we talked about perhaps creating a strategic planning committee as a board committee, and perhaps that might be a way to go forward on this, is to create an ad hoc committee that some people, are going to shepherd it, and to make sure, that we take these first steps and to make sure that it moves forward to the point where it doesn't take a year to get started. And I think you suggested that back last summer, and I think that might be a good way to go about it now, and have that committee, give us something concrete and tangible to work on towards the first steps.
Christian, thank you for that. How does everyone feel about that? Christian, I assume that you'd want to participate in that committee.
I would. I would also note that we are also a little bit shorthanded at the moment.
Yes.
And I know that some people are you know, pitching in to cover. And, but I would like to be part of that process, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Great. Thank you for that input. On the question of continue to expend time, effort, worthwhile, we're all kind of north-south. Yeah, let's continue to march on this. Okay, great. Thank you for that. In terms of Christian's idea about an ad hoc committee of sorts, task force, whatever you want to refer to it, I don't want to spend any more time. We've been at tonight for a while, and I appreciate everybody's time, but in the interest of it, let Christian, I have you down. If anyone else looking around right now wants to join on that team, let me know. If you're on the fence, undecided, let me know. I think we'd be limited in terms of how many board participants we'd have on that. I'd be actually part of that process, so that's 3. If there's someone else that wants to let me know, and we'll try to stand that up, committee, and get it going forward. I think we could probably establish that committee at our next meeting, and with, you know, a specific, hey, this is the purpose, and these are the quote-unquote deliverables. I don't want to do that tonight, but I like the way forward. Does that seem good with everybody? Yeah?
I think that's something we can coordinate via email and then
Yeah.
have something ready to go for next meeting.
Yep. Great. Okay. Anything else on that? Well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your patience and your time as we talked about that. So then let's move to recognition of visitors. Is anyone wanting to step forward? And now's the time. Yeah. All right. With that, I would entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for your time this evening. Yeah.